They are battered, outdated, and built before most of today's soldiers were even born. They are the junk weapons that Ukraine is using in its war against Russia. American cast-offs, Cold War leftovers, and Reagan-era military antiques. Yet this so-called junk is helping to destroy Russia's modern army. How is that even possible? How are these dated weapons helping Ukraine in its fight and humiliating one of the largest military forces in the world? Let's look at why America is handing over what looks like scrap and how it's humiliating Russia in Ukraine. First, this so-called junk is military surplus, equipment the US no longer needs. Some of it has been in storage for decades, too outdated to sell, but too expensive to destroy safely. Scrapping a single armored vehicle can cost tens of thousands of dollars in labor, hazardous material disposal, and transport. Some of it dates back to Vietnam or was used in the Gulf, Iraq, or Afghanistan. The Pentagon saw an opportunity to save millions, recycle it by giving it to Ukraine in the fight against Russia, and the first vehicle to roll out of America's forgotten war chest, one of the oldest and most battle-hardened armored vehicles in US history. The M113 has been called a battlefield bus. Introduced in 1960, it was first deployed by US troops in Vietnam. Since then, it's seen action in nearly every major American conflict, including the Gulf War, Iraq, and Afghanistan. It looks like a steel shoebox, boxy, flat with no frills, but this armored personnel carrier was built to move infantry under fire and survive. At one point, the US had over 6,000 of these sitting in storage, collecting dust in depots until the war in Ukraine broke out. Then they got a second life. The US handed approximately 900 over to the Ukrainian forces, repainting them and shipping them by rail and sea. But why use the M113? Because it's tough, simple, and cheap. It doesn't need digital dashboards or complex electronics. Ukrainian mechanics can fix it with a welding torch, a wrench, and spare parts scavenged from old tractors if needed. And in battle, these junk boxes are used to rush troops toward Russian lines under cover of armor, deploy anti-tank teams, or evacuate the wounded. Ukrainian infantry, rolling in Vietnam-era vehicles, are taking ground from what Russia calls its elite forces. The M113 might be moving troops, but its cousin, the M106 mortar carrier, is moving firepower. Based on the same chassis, the M106 trades infantry seating for a massive 107mm mortar system, built to rain high explosive rounds from behind cover. It's another Cold War veteran that the US once mothballed and is now rolling across Ukraine with a second life and a serious punch. A variant of the M113 was built specifically to carry a 107mm or 4.2-inch mortar into the fight. Developed in the 1960s, the M106 was designed to follow infantry units and deliver rapid indirect fire support from behind cover. The US retired most M106s in the late 1980s, and many were kept in storage or transferred to allies. Several have made their way to Ukraine through third-party donations. Once there, Ukrainian crews adapted quickly. They used them to set up mobile mortar teams that can move fast, fire fast, and vanish before Russia can respond. It's another example of how a low-tech, high-impact platform from decades ago found new life on the front lines, and proves that even a tracked mortar carrier from the Cold War can still be effective. When it comes to junk being used, transport is just the beginning. Even old artillery is being used in the fight against Russia, like the M109 howitzer, also known as the Paladin. This isn't just old fire support, it's a Cold War cannon on tracks, reborn to fight a modern war. This howitzer doesn't just support infantry, but it clears the way and suppresses Russian artillery. It blasts trenches into silence before a single Ukrainian boot hits the ground. Originally fielded in 1963, this 155mm self-propelled howitzer is a relic of the Cold War, but one that's still in active US service today. America sent more than several dozen to Ukraine, specifically older A5 variants as part of military aid packages. These beasts can fire 6 rounds per minute, each shell weighing over 100 pounds. That's enough to destroy Russian bunkers, blast trenches, and stop armored advances in their tracks. But what makes the M109 so powerful isn't just its firepower, it's its mobility. Ukrainian crews can fire, reposition, and reload before the Russians can triangulate their location. Shoot-and-scoot tactics have been essential in avoiding Russia's deadly Lancet drones and counter-battery fire. Once again, old junk beating new technology, just like the M101 howitzer. It's small, it's old, but don't underestimate its power. This towed artillery piece was first introduced in 1941 during World War II. The standard light field gun predates the Cold War entirely. It saw action on the beaches of Normandy, in the jungles of Vietnam, and even decades later in Iraq and Afghanistan as a backup asset. The US retired it from frontline service in the early 1980s, but hundreds remained in storage or were passed to allied nations. When Ukraine found itself short on artillery, America and its partners opened the vaults. Several nations, including Lithuania and the US, sent M101s to bolster Ukraine's firepower. These howitzers may lack automation or digital fire controls, but they're rugged, reliable, and easy to maintain. Ukrainian crews, often trained in a matter of days, have been using them to shell Russian trench systems, soft-skinned vehicles, and fortified positions. What they lack in tech, they make up for in availability and simplicity. And that effect becomes even more devastating when old artillery shells are upgraded with the M734 multi-option fuse, a Cold War-era component that turns basic rounds into precision killers. The M734 fuse might sound like a minor component, but it's a game-changer. Designed in the 1980s, this multi-option artillery fuse can be programmed to detonate in different ways: on impact, airburst just above the target, after a short delay, or by proximity. This adaptability makes it an asset in modern artillery operations, especially in scenarios where accuracy is critical. Its integration into Ukraine's artillery arsenal underscores a strategic emphasis on maximizing the impact of every round fired. As of November 2024, the United States has supplied Ukraine with a substantial quantity of artillery ammunition to support its defense against the Russian aggression. According to figures published by the US Department of Defense, the US has provided over 3 million 155mm artillery rounds, more than 800,000 105mm rounds, and approximately 400,000 152mm rounds. While the exact number of M734 multi-option fuses supplied to Ukraine has not been publicly disclosed, the sheer volume of artillery shells suggests that a significant portion may be equipped with advanced fuses, like the M734, to enhance their effectiveness. These old American war machines, armored carriers, howitzers, and Cold War mortars are proving that steel, simplicity, and smart tactics still win battles. Ukraine isn't just surviving with this so-called junk, it's hitting back hard. And while these ground systems pound Russian positions from below, another layer of forgotten US firepower is clearing the skies above: the Hawk system. Imagine trying to intercept a cruise missile or combat drone with tech from the 1960s. Sounds insane, right? But that's exactly what Ukraine has done with the US-made Hawk system. Hawk stands for Homing All the Way Killer, a name that aptly describes this formidable Cold War-era air defense system. Developed in the 1950s by Raytheon, the Hawk was the United States' first mobile, medium-range surface-to-air missile system designed to intercept low to medium-altitude aerial threats, particularly Soviet bombers and attack aircraft. It officially entered US service in 1959 and quickly became a cornerstone of NATO's integrated air defense network across Europe, Asia, and the Middle East. At its peak, the United States operated over 40 Hawk battalions, each equipped with multiple launchers and radar systems. The system was also widely exported, with more than 30 allied nations incorporating Hawk batteries into their defense arsenals. Notably, Israel employed Hawk missiles effectively during the Yom Kippur War in 1973, achieving numerous aerial victories. The Hawk system underwent several upgrades throughout its service life, starting with the improved Hawk, or I-Hawk, in the 1970s. Subsequent enhancements during the 1980s and 90s under Hawk Phase 1, 2, and 3 introduced more advanced radar systems, electronic countermeasures, and improved missile guidance, extending its engagement range to approximately 25 miles. Despite these upgrades, the longer-ranged Patriot missile system began entering service in 1985 and gradually replaced the Hawk as the US military's primary medium to long-range air defense system. In a testament to the system's enduring utility, refurbished Hawk units have been supplied to Ukraine to bolster its air defense capabilities amid the ongoing conflict. According to reports, the 14th Anti-Aircraft Missile Regiment of the Ukrainian Air Force, stationed in Poltava Oblast, has effectively utilized Hawk systems to intercept aerial threats. As of December 2023, this regiment successfully shot down 14 cruise missiles and over 40 Shahed 136 drones, demonstrating the Hawk's continued relevance on the modern battlefield. Ukraine isn't just reviving Cold War missile systems, it's getting creative with hardware even museums have forgotten, like the Zuni rocket. Developed by the US Armed Forces and the French Air Force in the 1950s, the Zuni is a 127mm air-to-ground rocket designed for use by carrier-based aircraft like the F-8 Crusader and A-4 Skyhawk. It saw heavy combat in Vietnam, where it was used against ground targets ranging from bunkers to troop concentrations. Each rocket is unguided, but it packs a serious punch, capable of carrying high-explosive, anti-tank, or incendiary warheads. At the time, it was considered cutting-edge, but after decades of use, newer guided missiles made the Zuni obsolete. Most were pulled from US frontline service by the 1990s, with tens of thousands left in storage as surplus, too outdated to sell, too useful to scrap entirely. The US sent 6,000 surplus rockets to Ukraine. What makes the Zuni rocket so effective in Ukraine isn't just its explosive power, but how it's being used. Originally designed to be launched from fighter jets, Ukraine had no aircraft compatible with the system, but undeterred, Ukrainian engineers got creative. They retrofitted Soviet-era ground platforms, including BM-21 Grad rocket trucks, to fire the Zuni like a ground-based artillery system. Mounting in improvised pods or adapted launch rails, these decades-old rockets are now being unleashed in volley fire and blanketing enemy positions with high-explosive warheads. Ukrainian forces are using them to strike Russian trench lines, infantry concentrations, and soft-skinned vehicles, especially in areas where traditional artillery is limited or needs rapid support. Their relatively compact size means they can be launched quickly, repositioned easily, and fired in large numbers. And because they were donated from vast US surplus stockpiles, they're not just effective, they're expendable. For Ukraine, it's another example of turning forgotten US hardware into a frontline force multiplier. But not every weapon in this junkyard arsenal is low-tech. Some are just old-tech learning new tricks. The AGM-88 HARM, or High-Speed Anti-Radiation Missile, was developed in the early 1980s by Texas Instruments and later Raytheon. Designed to destroy enemy radar systems, it locks onto radio frequency emissions and slams into them, before those systems can even fire. Early versions have a range of around 30 miles, while upgraded variants can reach up to 93 miles. The missile was originally launched from US aircraft like the F-16 or the EA-6B Prowler, but Ukraine has none of these platforms, so how did they make it work? Ukrainian engineers, with NATO assistance, managed to retrofit Soviet-era MiG-29s and Su-27s to fire Western AGM-88s, blending incompatible tech into a lethal battlefield solution. Modified pylons, adapting targeting systems, and creative programming turned Cold War-era fighters into radar-hunting platforms. And the results? Devastating. Ukrainian forces have used these missiles to knock out dozens of Russian air defense sites, including S-300 and Buk radar systems, weakening Russia's ability to operate safely in contested airspace. By late 2023, open-source intelligence had confirmed at least 30 radar and missile system kills tied directly to HARM strikes, many of which enabled safe follow-up missions by Ukrainian drones and strike aircraft. The United States has supplied an undisclosed but significant number of AGM-88 HARM missiles to Ukraine as part of multiple military aid packages since August 2022. The 19th US presidential drawdown package was the first to officially include the missile. Although precise figures haven't been made public, sources confirm that hundreds have been delivered from pre-modernization stockpiles, giving Ukraine a consistent supply of radar-killing firepower. Each missile carries a 66-kilogram high-explosive warhead and delivers pinpoint destruction. Even without the latest upgrades, these Cold War missiles have proven terrifyingly effective, forcing Russian radar crews to either stay dark or die trying to light up the sky. A weapon built to destroy Soviet air defense is now blinding Russian forces on the same battlefields it was designed to fight on. It's clear that this junk is significantly helping Ukraine's fight, but not all US weapons sent to Ukraine are vintage museum pieces. Some are still in use by American forces today. Others were modern in their day but now sidelined in favor of newer tech, but that doesn't mean they've lost their bite. Take the Javelin. This shoulder-fired, fire-and-forget anti-tank missile is a modern marvel. Introduced in the mid-1990s, it uses infrared imaging to lock onto a target, allowing the operator to take cover immediately after launch. Its top attack profile makes it especially lethal against tanks, striking where armor is weakest, right on top of the turret. When the war in Ukraine broke out, the US didn't just ship over its newest batches. It cleared out the first models, the early generation Javelins that had been sitting in warehouses for years. These missiles were nearing obsolescence by Pentagon standards. But on Ukraine's battlefields, they were nothing short of game-changing. In the first phase of the war, the Javelin was estimated to have a kill rate of 90% against Russian armor, according to a Center for Strategic and International Studies, or CSIS, report. Thousands were sent. Russian tank crews quickly learned to fear the telltale arc of a Javelin strike. Then there's the Stinger missile. A classic of Cold War design, the FIM-92 Stinger entered service in the 1980s and was used during the Soviet-Afghan War, where it helped Mujahideen fighters shoot down dozens of Soviet helicopters. It's a man-portable air defense system designed to take out low-flying aircraft with infrared homing. Though considered old tech by modern US standards, the Stinger was exactly what Ukraine needed to deal with Russian Ka-52 attack helicopters, all-land drones, and low-altitude fixed-wing aircraft. Within weeks of Russia's full-scale invasion, Ukrainian troops were using Stingers to force Russian aircraft to fly higher and less effectively. By mid-2023, the US had sent over 2,000 Javelins and 800 Stinger systems to Ukraine. And just like that, a weapon designed in the Reagan era was once again turning the tide of war. In both cases, the US didn't need to build new missiles, just send the surplus old stock, the stored warheads, the legacy systems. And it's not just the US doing this. Across NATO and beyond, countries are shipping unused supplies to the east. Ukraine's fight has become a global effort, a coalition of junk, and it's hitting Russia harder than anyone expected. Spain sent Ukraine Leopard 2A4 main battle tanks, built in the 1980s and long retired from frontline Spanish service. These are older models and less advanced than the A6 or A7 versions, but they're still heavily armored, heavily armed, and fully capable of taking on Russian T-72s and T-80s. Spain initially pledged 10 Leopard 2A4s, with more being refurbished for future delivery. Germany, after early hesitation, sent its Gepard anti-aircraft tanks, retired systems from the Cold War and which hadn't fired a shot in years. The Gepard mounts twin 35mm autocannons and radar systems that excel at shooting down drones, helicopters, and low-flying aircraft. Since their arrival, Gepards have become one of Ukraine's most trusted tools for taking out Shahed drones. As of late 2023, Germany had sent 46 Gepards, along with over 60,000 rounds of ammunition. The United Kingdom delivered Stormer HVMs, high-velocity missile launchers mounted on tracked vehicles. These systems, which fire Starstreak anti-aircraft missiles at over Mach 4, were developed in the 1990s and designed to protect ground forces from air threats. While the platform isn't modern by today's standards, the Stormer remains extremely effective at denying Russia control of the low skies. Even Australia got involved, sending 120 Bushmaster protected mobility vehicles, rugged, wheeled armored trucks developed in the early 1990s for Iraq and Afghanistan. While not exactly vintage, these vehicles were drawn from Australia's reserve fleet and adapted for Ukraine's needs. Other examples of forgotten firepower coming back to life include France's donation of 30 AMX-10 RC armored reconnaissance vehicles, first deployed in the late 1970s, Belgium's supply of M113 armored personnel carriers and mini-me machine guns pulled straight from reserve stocks, and the Netherlands' contribution of YPR-765 infantry fighting vehicles, a Dutch-modified version of the US M113. Poland and Czech, tapping into their post-Soviet arsenals, sent T-72 tanks which were once part of the Warsaw Pact, now aimed at stopping Russian advances. Each piece of hardware tells the same story. Old systems reactivated, repurposed, and thrust back into combat, proving their value on the toughest front lines in Europe. And make no mistake, Russia is feeling the heat, because for every outdated tank or dusty launcher, there's something Moscow fears more than firepower: Ukrainian resolve. Time and time again, Ukrainian forces have shown that courage, tactical innovation, and grit can turn museum-grade hardware into frontline weapons. They're proving that it's not the age of the equipment that matters, but how it's used. What others discarded, they've turned into a lifeline. America may have led the way. The US Department of State reports this junk equates to $31.7 billion, but now it's a global effort. From Spain to Australia, allied nations have joined the push, digging deep into storage yards, military museums, and long-retired reserves to keep Ukraine in the fight. So why is this strategy working? Because war isn't always about having the newest toys. It's about the volume, the logistics, and getting usable weapons into the fight quickly. The United States has billions of dollars worth of old military gear sitting idle. By recycling it, the US and its allies are turning it into combat power, flooding Ukraine with equipment that's proven, simple, and rugged. Gear that may be outdated for American troops is more than enough for Ukraine to hold ground, take ground, and make it hurt. And this scares Russia, because it means that the West doesn't need to send F-35s or M1A2 Abrams to bleed the Russian war machine dry. From Cold War artillery to Vietnam-era APCs, from analog mortars to decades-old drone killers, Ukraine is proving that with enough willpower, enough ingenuity, and enough so-called junk, you can fight a superpower to a standstill. But what do you think? Can America's surplus become the unexpected hero of Ukraine's fight for survival? Or is it a cheaper way to get rid of old junk? Let us know what you think in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to The Military Show. Now go and check out undeniable proof that all Russian weapons suck, or click this other video instead.